Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Redeem Her Time podcast. You are in for a really great conversation today. And at first glance, when you saw that this is about marriage, you might have wondered, wait, what does this have to do with time and business? And I'm here to tell you that this has everything to do with time and business because our relationships are something that need time, right? And if we're spending, too much time working on our business or not enough time in the, feeding those relationships, we are going to feel the effects of them as business owners. And so I'm excited to bring Connie Durham along with us today, so that way she can really speak into this area because she is an expert on how to come together in your marriage and work together, right? When you think about where your time is going and what your priorities are. And so, Connie, I'm excited that you're here. Tell us a little bit about you and what all you're juggling in this season of your life and marriage.
Thank you, Lisa. Well, whenever I think about time, I think about the time in each day. I think about the time in the week, the month, in life, in business, being with your kids, taking care of your husband, keeping that relationship going. And I actually have a podcast, The Extraordinary Marriage Podcast, and I've been working on that for 2 years, and I'm going into my third season in November. And I have found as I've made it through all those seasons of life, getting married, small kids, teenagers, people, my kids getting married, having kids, getting unmarried, having more kids, you know. I'm reminded that even though I get so very, very busy in my business, and in the past few years, since COVID, I really found myself taken away in all the tech and all the marketing and all the details. But I'm reminded that for me, I am a people person and I am the happiest when I am with people or serving people or partying with people. And that is the important thing in our marriage is that we do get taken away by all the other things, even the busyness with our kids. And we forget to take care of our most important thing, which is our marriage. Because if we're not taking care of our marriage, the troubles from that pour into everything else.
Yeah, it's so true, right? And like when I talk with women around their time, so much what we talk about here on the podcast is around how it directly relates to your business. And yet, if you have seen the Redeem Her Time life wheel, you'll see there are 8 different areas. And one of them is our relationships and our family relationships specifically. And marriage is one of those key ones. So not all of my audience is married. So if you're listening, like you can apply a lot of these principles to other really important relationships in your life as well. Maybe a little bit different context, but kind of similar principles. But here's the thing. When I talk about that wheel, Connie, like we talk about it being like a bicycle wheel. But if these are all the spokes that are coming out, and if one of them was weak or broken or brittle or cracked, like your wheel is still going to roll, but it's going to be like that thump, thump every time it goes over that spot, right? And so, yes, you're going to be able to go down the road, but like it's going to start putting pressure on those other areas of your life. And it's interesting how one area can really impact another. And so, yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation around this. I would love to hear a little bit more about like how you got into, being able to speak into this. So often God's taken us on some kind of our own journey that equips us, to be able to really help others with theirs. So tell us a little bit about just, maybe how God has brought you to this place of serving women around their relationship, this primary relationship in their home, and what that's looked like for you.
Well, I spent my life working with women. I taught ballet for over 20 years. I was with Mary Kay Cosmetics for 30 years. Those overlap, by the way. I'm not that old. And,
You look
um,
amazing, so it's okay.
I'm one of those that gets a little restless at different points in my life. And it was time to move into something else. My kids were married. And what I realized that I had had an easy time. My family was well balanced. My parents were. And you know what? I believe that love is the most important thing that you start with. I was just looking at something and it was talking about discipline. And this guy said, well, but you know what? It's important when you have discipline to also have love. And love is an important thing. So, balance in my family. I married someone with balance in their family. I didn't know any difference. We had a great, we're still going on. We've had a great marriage. And it's been a constant time of growth, though. And, those kind of things take time. And
Mm.
going through those seasons of, small children to married kids, what happened was when my kids got married, there was challenges and people bring in problems from their families, from their teenage years, from their young adult years. They bring all this baggage into their relationship and they forget it's there. They don't even realize that it is coloring their choices and everything they do. And that when two people bring their lives together, both of these lives are really different. And some people compromise. And, I want to please you. You want to please me. They do that well. And then others battle because they're like, this is how my family did it, or this is all I know. I'm not even interested in learning anything else. So, as my kids got married, I realized that there were challenges in families and that everything's not even whenever you get married. And so I think that's where God started to give me a passion for couples, a passion for families. And then even right now, I'm doing in a week. I'm a part of a business women's group, BWFC, and we are doing something. It's for an organization called Bloom. Well, Bloom is about foster kids. Well, I have seen foster kids, come into our church. I've helped with the youth at church, and I've seen what happens to families when they don't pay attention to their needs and take the time. There's your key word.
Right?
They don't take the time to figure out their problems. So there's arguments and fusses and people button heads and people who have troubles, they don't even realize that there's another way to do it. They
Mm.
don't even realize that they can have a better life if they'll pay attention to what's going on and look for something to help them figure it out. And so that's really where that passion came from. And I'm one of those. I just told some ladies at a church meeting this past week, as I started leading my women's ministry, I said, well, I couldn't do this unless I have a passion for it. And, passion comes and goes sometimes. We have to kind of work on keeping it going. And we think about that even whenever it's marriage, right? But sometimes we have to work to keep that passion going that we are liking that other person. And honestly, if somebody's not nice all the time, I'm like, I really don't like to play with them very much. So it's important to be good to your spouse.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, it takes time and it happens over time. And we have to invest time. I mean, there's so many ways that
Hmm.
time really leads into this conversation. And around here, we talk about this concept of ROTI, return on time invested. And I always say, where you are in any area of your business and any area of your life is the result of how you either have or have not invested time up till now. So, maybe like for the listener listening right now, like kind of just do a pause and do a little bit of like a self-reflection, like where do I feel like my marriage or this key relationship is that you have in mind? And then think back to how have or have not you been, have you not been, I guess is how you'd say it, investing time up till now, because it is going to be the consequence, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. It is going to be what gives us what we have now, which is actually really good news because that means we can change things. We can change how much time we invest or the quality of the time we invest and things like that. But let's start with kind of maybe where someone is right now, where maybe they are in a place where they haven't been investing that time, or maybe there's been, like you said, a lot of just, friction around. I mean, time is our most precious resource in business, but also in life, And so I think a lot of people, we, argue about money, but I think there can also be a lot of conflict and maybe it's not spoken around where our time is going because there's maybe some misalignment of priorities or we're not, in the same place. So let's dive into this, a little bit more and kind of what that looks like when we are not on the same page and when, our time maybe is being spent other ways or we have differing views on, what to invest that time in. What does that look like? And then how does it affect us even as not only the relationship, but also in, as those who are trying to also build businesses and lead ministries like you and I both are.
Well, first of all, let's think about this. I bet every person out there has said at some time, if they're married or whether it's a boyfriend or girlfriend, we've just not been spending enough time together. And that's the first thing that says, hey, I'm needing something a little bit more, and I'm feeling like maybe, you're not paying attention to me or that kind of thing. I teach on the different personality styles, and some people don't need very much. They're that quiet type, and they don't need that. They're just not needy when it comes to affection as much as others. But for a lot of us, I mean, I'm one of those where I need to spend time with the people I love, not only my spouse, but my kids, your parents, once you're out of the house, your friends, and time is a big factor in that. But what happens when you're not, spending enough time together? There again, whether it's your spouse, your kids, or your friends, you start having a little arguments and you differences in opinion, and you start maybe kind of holding a grudge. You're kind of irritated, but some people would never mention, hey, I need a little bit more time with you. And so you kind of have to have your eyes wide open, your ears open, and pay attention to those little red flags where people are maybe getting sarcastic, or they're really showing a little more anger than usual, or they seem very stressed. And I've just had a time in my business, as marriage is my passion. But what I found was I was spending so much time working on marketing and recording and writing and in other classes for, personal self growth, that suddenly I found myself just pulling back from everything. I was like, something's not working, and I have to stop and assess it. And all your relationships are the same way. You have to stop and you have to assess what's working, what's not. And often we have said yes to way too many things.
Mhm.
And when you say yes to one thing, then you are saying no to something else. And so if you're a person who says yes to everything everyone asks you to do, then you're probably saying no to your spouse all the time. Something my husband and I have talked about, especially with him being in ministry, is that if you have something going on, you're going on a trip or you're doing something else, or you have a dinner date with friends, because your own dinner date, would that count as much as your dinner date with friends? If you don't have something going on and something goes on at the church or that kind of thing, you have to drop what you're doing. And sometimes you're just resting or spending time together. But that doesn't count as much as if you are going on a trip. And so if you say yes to things, you're saying no to other things. Another thing for couples that I look at, it's really important, is making deposits and withdrawals.
Mm.
And literally in all relationships, we make deposits where we are uh, encouraging that person, spending time with them, doing things with them. Um, whatever it is. Or we are bad mouthing them, demeaning them, talking down, and that is withdrawals. And you have to make enough deposits in your relationship. Hopefully, you're not trying to just undo the negatives,
Right.
but you really want to be making deposits in your relationships all the time. And if your spouse, or there again, your friend, is making deposits all the time, you've got a great relationship. You love being together and you love doing things together.
Yeah, yeah, right. And you're like you said, it's not just trying to even things out, but
Yeah.
hopefully in a, loving marriage relationship, we're way more focused on the adding value, right? And the connecting and that type of thing. And yet, sometimes things happen or come up and, and those withdrawals happen, but when you have that foundation and you've got way more of the other, then that person knows your heart and you're able to work through those things, right? So, I mean, you and I were talking about this before we hit record. Like, when you get married, for many of us, it was, back in our early 20s when we really didn't know, what we didn't know. We were still trying to figure out who we are and all of this. And then, like you said, we have careers that come in and kids that come in and businesses and grandkids and in-laws and all the things. There are a lot of different seasons. So how do we pay attention to maybe what it's time for in our marriage, in the season that we're in? Because it may be that, maybe a season we were in before, it felt really good or it was easy or, like we were really naturally connecting. And then maybe, we're walking into a season now where it feels a little bit more challenging or like things are a little bit more, yeah, disconnected. How would you speak into that as you think about the seasons of marriage?
Well, I think that whenever we first get married, we're all about each other. We're figuring out how we want to put our life together. And for some people, children come along way late, 10 years later even. But for some of us, by year two, we already have a little one. And everything changes then. And lots of things are all around that baby. And then there's another baby and another baby. I had three kids in 5 years when I got married. But it's okay because my husband and I were both about the kids. And you find some time together and everything's about the kids. Honestly, we're winging it, right? We're all winging it because, we didn't have any training in relationships and marriage. Except for whatever we saw in our parents. And so, if we saw problems in our family or problems with our parents, then it's really important to evaluate because figure out what happened and what do you want, not about what you don't want. So often we get stuck on what we don't want instead of what we want in our lives. So, we're winging it. Then come along the teenage years, you're still busy, you're running kids around. Now you've been married a while and you're starting to pay attention to the fact that, gosh, we need a little bit more time together. We're so busy with the kids. And then by the time the kids get married, you're getting ready to have an empty nest. Now you're going to get to know each other a little bit better. And are you going to enjoy your time together or are you going to hope they stay at work or hope they don't retire? What are we going to do if he retires and we're home together all the time? But the thing is, finding what your spouse needs from you and then what uh, you need from them. Actually, there's a book, it's called His Needs and Her Needs. And from that, I took the chemistry of lasting love because I believe that if you could figure out what your spouse needs most from you, because often we assume they need the same things we do, but they don't. Most often, you have kind of opposite needs, that goes back to personality style somewhat, and some things are man and woman differences. And when you can figure out what they need, then you can focus on those few things. Because the truth is, we can't focus on everything, but we can focus on one thing at a time. In the chemistry of lasting love, there's literally, you can actually get it free on my website, but there's literally 10 different needs. One of them is adventure. I need change in my life, so I need a little adventure. Usually that's a guy thing, but for me, I need that adventure or I get a little, bored. Um, you know, a lot of times the men need that intimacy time a little more often than us ladies think about, so there's 10 needs and you figure out his and yours and then you post them on the refrigerator because I've been married 46 years and the other day when I was working on this again, I had to go to my file and pull out our little sheets that my husband and I did for this because we did it too. And all these years married, you don't isolate and think about the needs that your husband has, whether it's to spend time or affection or what. But learn those needs, and now you have a track to run on.
Yeah, exactly. I love this. And it's really always about getting curious about the other person and also not assuming that they know what's going on in our heads. I think so often as women, like we're like, why is he not getting this? Why is he not seeing this? Does he not realize the last time we went on a date night or had a real conversation? Like it's very easy for us to notice things and then not verbalize them and then wonder, why they don't. Such a great reminder, and I will definitely make sure we link to, to that chemistry of lasting love that you shared, so that others can look at those 10 and identify like how many do you, typically recommend? Is it just like maybe two or three per person, or like, sometimes like you said, too many, can leave us a little bit distracted and going in too many directions.
Well, the guide actually gives you 10 total, and you have to rate each one to your very most or your very least. And so you come up with five, your top five. And I
Okay.
would say out of your top five, you really really pay attention to those first three. I mean, because those are the kind of things that keep you together as a couple and help you relate and support each other as a couple. Everybody wants to be appreciated, everybody wants to be heard and understood. And when you fulfill these needs for one another, and like I said, one of them is, like maybe spending time together or affection or, like I said, mine was adventure and I literally get bored. So three top ones, but you each get five.
Okay.
And they'll get a probably different, but you'll find a few probably that you have in common.
Sure, sure. Yeah. And how amazing, right? To like instead of, like you said, instead of spending time on thinking about what you don't want, like and what your maybe your spouse
Yes.
isn't providing, right? To really focus on these things, right? These things that are going to grow you and move you in the direction that you want to go. Like that's a much better return on time invested than, hoping they're going to figure it out or just, being busy or distracted by life and things around us. So I love this. So as we walk through this, right, do you have any, so like we kind of identify maybe what those are. Um, yeah, are there any practical steps you have around, okay, now how do I actually start, speaking into those areas or, like meeting those needs and making sure that I'm consistent with that?
Well, I would say listen to my podcast, of course,
Hey, shameless plug.
because Um, ultimately, when I began this, it was to teach the personality styles because the people are opposite and they clash and they get the opposite of what they expect because their spouse speaks totally different. So, one of the first things is to understand, are one of you really outgoing? If you're both really outgoing, sometimes you might clash because you're so strong-minded. And if you're both very, what I call methodical, you take your time in life, takes time to make decisions and that kind of thing, then probably you're both happy with your quiet life. But if one is really outgoing and one is a more relaxed kind of person, um, sometimes needs aren't filled from that. So this is where I started and this is where I wanted to teach the most. I call that rediscovering your spouse because people get married, they love everything about each other, but eventually they start getting on one another's nerves because they are different. But as I began my journey, and I love the word growth that you use, Lisa, because we look for growth in our kids. We look for growth when we're being educated. We look for growth when we're running a business and we want to learn more things. So, why do people not look for personal growth when it comes to relationships? That is something that I've come across. I'm like, why do we do that? We just don't know any better. We can only focus on one thing. I don't know. But this kind of thing trickles down all the way from not only just your marriage, but your children. People expect their kids to be the same as them. You always hear that. Well, dad's a doctor, so you need to be a doctor. Mom's a teacher, so you need to be a teacher. So we're all different. And so it just doesn't work that way. Think about when you're moving into your life, if you had to do something that one of your parents did that you're just no good at all, you have no passion for it. And often we do that. We think our kids are going to be like us. But you can learn to deal with your spouse and you can learn to deal with your children and to help them grow up and be their very best and to be confident rather than thinking and feeling like they're not enough. And something I thought about, Lisa, since you're talking about time so much, was I remembered going to a John Maxwell event, and actually my husband went with me, and this is before I started all this. And it talked about time, and the person presented the idea of, your body clock and having your best time of the day and your, tired time of the day and that kind of stuff. And as they talked about that, and here, I mean, I was probably already in my 50s by then, and I hadn't really thought about it. And what happened was a lot of times I beat myself up whenever I was exhausted and tired and really couldn't function anymore. And as I listened to that, I thought, wow, Eureka! I have really found something that matters is understanding when you are your best, when you have your best energy, and understanding when you're having your low energy. Don't try to make decisions. Don't try to have a conversation with your spouse. Don't do these things. Just chill. And to me, that was the best thing. Well, my husband, as we talked about that conference, my husband said, all that was really good except that thing on time. He goes, I mean, like maybe he already got that a long time ago, or he's easier on himself. But for me, I was like, wow, that's profound for me. So you never know what you're going to learn, but it's your spouse is not going to hear things the same way that you hear things. And that was profound for me because I'm hard on myself. Are you hard on
Sure,
yourself,
sure.
Lisa?
Yeah. Well, and I think we go through, especially, I mean, for us as women, we're, this season of life, my audience is mostly midlife women. Like, hello, perimenopause and menopause is a real thing. And all of a sudden your emotions are way different than they used to be. And like your fatigue and, maybe even your, excitement about intimacy and things like that. It's like all these things start changing. And yes, then we get frustrated that it's not the way that it was. And so paying attention to, yeah, like where am I best? When am I feeling my best? And how can I maximize that? And I think also knowing that about your spouse too, like if I'm trying to have a conversation with my husband when it's first thing in the morning, like he is not, it's not going to be the best time to really have a deep conversation, so I know that just based on what is the best time for him, when to have some of those deeper conversations or really ask a question that I want, to get some more. So I think it is important. And just thinking like the person we married is yes, the same person, but they've grown over the 10,
And
15, 20,
changed.
30, whatever years. Yes, we've changed, they've changed. So how do we grow together instead of growing apart? And that really comes down to time, and how we're investing that time. So I love this conversation. And I always love kind of bringing this back to the why, right? Like, how does, when we are committed to investing time in our relationship, we are committed to really understanding and communicating our needs to our spouse. Like what I mean, it's kind of almost like, yeah, right. Of course, it has an effect on our relationship. So, like, how does it affect our relationship and our future, with them? But then also, how does it, maybe even affect other areas of our life, including our business, when we are taking time to invest intentionally in our marriage?
Okay, all that, and I'm not sure what you asked.
What's the benefit? What's the like? Why do we
Benefit.
even bother? Like, yeah, why is this important type of thing?
Okay, so why is it important? Well, the divorce rate is really high. And why is that? Because people get married and they have differences and they don't know how to resolve them. It's just as simple as that. They maybe haven't had it demonstrated in their life, taking the time, figuring out personal growth, figuring out how to resolve things. Maybe the conflict is so great that it's really horrendous. I've seen that where it's so horrendous and you wonder if it can ever be fixed. But you know what? Okay, we'll bring into this prayer. So, prayer, if you are a God-fearing person, prayer is the place because it's a higher power than I have. And it's good to know God is on our side. But I think, people just have to stop and, like I said, take that time together and spend time together and pay attention to their relationship. Because if you don't, then things do fall apart. Think about a business where maybe you've not been paying attention to your finances, and all of a sudden one day everything falls apart. There was a time, in 2008, where people were losing their houses right and left. Somebody wasn't taking the time to figure out their finances or to pay their bills, right? To pay their house notes. And that caused a big decline and a big problem with the banks and everything else. So, one thing leads to another.
Mm.
It's kind of like a round circle, one thing leading to another. And taking time for your spouse means taking time for your family, remembering to put your spouse first, because often we begin to put our kids first. And it's kind of natural as moms. We just about can't help it from time to time because, in the beginning, they're helpless little babies. But as time goes on and you have your child take a little more responsibility and you make sure that you're giving that spouse attention because there again, according to personalities, some people need more attention than others. And if they're not feeling like they're your number one, then that can really be a problem. Also, God says to leave your mother and father and, become as one. And if you didn't, we don't want to leave our mother and father. We owe them a lot. They took care of us. We're thankful, right? But we have to leave our mother and father. It's all about our spouse now. And it is a journey. It is personal growth. And so I want to remind people to, I keep saying that, take the time. It just rings, doesn't it?
It
But,
does.
time passes. The other day, I started to realize my daughter's a very good planner, and that is not always my forte, but I can be a good planner when I decide to. And I found that I was, not planning and sticking with the plan, and especially for family. I was getting my business stuff done,
Mm.
but with my family, I was not planning to spend time with friends, planning to spend time with family. And so planning's a big deal. I was just working on our year for our church, and somebody said, "Gosh, I like how you're planning it all, for the year. You want to plan everything for the year." I'm like, "Yeah, because I am that person that if I don't plan it and put it on the books right now so that I can take care of each thing as it's going, if I don't plan for success there, then the 12 months will go by and I'll be like, whoa, where did that go?" And so planning your life, planning your marriage, planning time with your kids, planning vacation, planning your finances, planning is so very important to success. And it's important to the success of a marriage.
Yes, so true, right? And if we don't plan to give those things time and attention, one day they will demand our time and attention. And like you shared,
And it won't be good.
it will always cost more down the road. So we don't want to be there. Well, thank you. You have given us so much inspiration and some great reminders and maybe some new perspectives or renewed perspectives that we need around what it's time for, especially in our marriage. You've mentioned a couple of resources. So like let's go back and circle back to those things so that way people can connect with you who want to invest more time in this area of their life. Where can people find you?
Well, first of all, the extraordinary marriage, and make sure it's the extraordinary marriage slash five, it's the number, five needs. And there you can go and you can get the lasting love, the chemistry of lasting love guide. You can print it out, go through it, and actually there's several podcasts that I have on that, so you can listen to some of those too, and really focus there first. Then the second thing is um, the extraordinary marriage slash discover. And that's where you can discover more about yourself and discover about your spouse. So then you can understand the things that are irritating you or bothering you. And you understand it's not about you, it's about them. So if somebody
Mhm.
has an anger problem or somebody seems like they're shutting you out or any of that kind of thing, it's not about you, it's about them. And it's like their DNA, it's how they're made. And so you have to learn how to work through that.
Well, thank you. Very valuable resources. I'll make sure to link those down in the show notes. And my audience also knows that I always invite our guests and our listeners to come over into the Redeem Her Time community where we take this conversation off the podcast and actually start doing something about it. And so I want to encourage you, listeners, if you're not already a member of the Redeem Her Time community, it's time to come over and join us because we are over there being intentional about our time, not only in our business, but also in areas of our life like our marriage. And so I want to invite you to come over there. You can find the link in the show notes, redeemhertime.com/community. And let's continue this conversation. I'm really excited about the fruit that this is going to produce. So